Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Wendy Sellers here, the HR lady. We are here today with a fractional HR executive, Cynthia Keaton, who is also a speaker and an author. Welcome to the show, Cynthia.
Thanks, Wendy. So happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, thank you for your time today. Tell our listeners about yourself and how you got to where you are now.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, I'm a fractional HR executive, and a little bit about my background. After I graduated with a master's in HR, I was lucky enough to start my career at Procter & Gamble. And that was one of the best companies to start for HR experience. And the reason was they were in what at that time was groundbreaking. It was high performing work teams where the managers really like a coach and the teams run themselves. So I was able to learn a lot about how to create a really meaningful employee culture, how to operate in world-class safety and operating environment. And so also how to really reward employees in a high-performing environment. So it was a fantastic foundational experience. So that's how I started. And then from there, my goal was always take a job that's going to challenge me, always take a job where I can learn the business side and not just the HR side. Because as you know, as HR professionals, we can really deliver strategic results if we understand the business. If we don't understand the business, it's going to be more difficult, right? So I've taken jobs in public companies, private equity companies, government organizations, and nonprofits. So that I would have a really well-rounded experience. My goal was always end up consulting. So after 20 years and all these different industries and size companies who had so many different challenges, I feel like now's the time to step out with all of that knowledge, because I can pretty much help any size organization in any industry really solve the problems, the people problems, the strategy problems that they encounter.
No, we never have people problems in businesses,
Never.
right? Never.
Hey, if it wasn't for people, work would be easy, right?
Right. That's funny. Well, my first question for you is what are the biggest signs that an organization is ready for a fractional HR executive instead of, say, a full-time HR leader?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think there's a lot of misconception between what is an HR consultant and what is a fractional HR executive. So an HR consultant, as our HR compadres will know, really can come in and help with payroll, just payroll, with benefits, with employee relations, that the day-to-day transactional administrative type stuff. Well, a fractional HR executive is really there to help companies manage those more high-level problems, issues that an HR consultant may not even have the experience to solve. So I feel that companies often think, well, if we're not big enough, we can't afford a fractional HR executive.
Right.
It's just out of our budget. It's not something we can do. And that's just not the case. So unlike a full-time salaried HR executive, a fractional executive could come in, quickly help you, focus on business outcomes, and in the end, hopefully will save you money, because they've been able to identify a lot of the inefficiencies in the operation and in the people strategy. So it's different than the perception of what an executive can do for an organization.
Right. They're part of the team. They're really part of the team. And maybe it could turn into a full-time role.
Perhaps.
It did for me at one point. When I stepped in for a small but very, very, very fastly growing company with multiple companies across the US. And I was like, oh, I'm going to come in as a consultant. Then I ended up being fractional HR. And then I ended up being full-time, just because I was like, you need this right now, until I finally said, okay, now it's time to replace me. And I will help help you build your HR team. The same goes for a lot of HR roles in HR, even like recruiters, right? You can
Mhm.
have an external
Mhm.
recruiter, but you still need them to know your culture.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I find that there's pretty much three major buckets of when somebody can truly use a fractional. And that, first of all, is if they're undergoing rapid growth, like you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they've gone through a merger or an acquisition, they're restructuring, they might be relocating a company, which I helped the company move from the West Coast to the East Coast. They needed that expertise and bringing 200 employees with us. So that's a time when you might need a fractional. You may not even need them 40 hours a week, but you need
Right.
that broad strategy of how am I going to manage this massive project, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe your HR department, if you even have one, just doesn't have the bandwidth to do something like that and continue to support the business from an HR perspective. Or maybe they just don't have the experience to do that. That's highly likely, right? With
Right.
especially smaller organizations. Then there's also, you've got compliance and regulatory issues. So you could now be to the point where your CFO just can't manage the compliance issues from HR anymore. Maybe they've had to do that because you don't have that HR expertise. Well, now it's time to bring in a fractional in so that you can be proactive with your compliance and regulatory risk versus reactive. So
Mm-hmm.
you can do like I did with one of the county governments in Florida, come in and do a massive HR audit and figure out where are the compliance risks and help them fix those. So that's something that's another time when you could use a fractional. And then maybe you've got a major project like an HR system that needs to be selected and implemented, or your benefits needs overhaul. Then you can bring in someone who has that expertise who can do that for you in a relatively short order and make sure that you get the most cost effective programs and most efficiently operating programs that you can have. So those are the kind of the three major times when that should trigger the need for outside expertise.
I love it. And currently, I was looking up some statistics. It said I found an article that approximately 35% of US companies right now are
Mhm.
using fractional leaders, including in HR. And
Yeah.
that I know personally that that is expected to continue increasing and kind of become more of the norm.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree 100%. I mean, I'm in HR networks, and a large percentage of them now are fractional executives, and they likewise see the trend continuing. I think that one of the advantages of a fractional is that you're not pulled into the day-to-day operational type office politics,
Hmm.
so to speak, right?
No politics in
Right.
offices.
No,
No.
God, never happens, never. So I think you can come in you can come in and quickly help them, but you shouldn't get pulled into the daily operational things. So I think they can be more efficient. Like if they come in and they can focus on the business outcomes, and it's to the company's financial advantage to do that. Like you're not paying benefits, you're not having a long-term head count unless you get to the point where that's what you want, as you
Right.
said, right?
Yeah.
But not all organizations are to the point where they're ready for that. So I see it as a huge advantage to organizations to use fractional help, not just in HR, but in accounting as well, for sure.
Now, one concern that many really company leaders have is whether someone working, maybe only a few days each week can truly understand the company culture, as we just talked about. How
Right.
do successful fractional executives in HR specifically integrate quickly and become trusted business partners?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that is one of the biggest misconceptions that companies considering a fractional have, is that in order for you to understand the company and drive business results, you have to be in the office 5 days a week. Like that, without that, you can't possibly learn the culture. And I think that is truly a misconception. I think that if you have been in a number of organizations in different industries, different size companies, you've had to learn company operations, culture, values very quickly. You don't have 6 months to learn that. You got weeks.
Mhm.
And so those of us who are fractional, we have a lot of experience doing that, like getting to know the leadership, We ask lots of questions. We sit in on meetings. We talk to the managers. We talk to the employees. We quickly learn the operational issues. We quickly learn where we need to focus. And so you don't need 5 days a week in the office to do that. And I think the proof is in the pudding, right? It's
Right.
like the business outcomes that we can deliver will show the company that we can do this without being there 5 days a week. Like, I mean, that's what you're contracting for when you're contracting with a fractional executive. You know, you should be identifying the business outcomes that you need so that that fractional knows where to focus. And then it's up to us to learn the culture, the environment, the processes very quickly so that then we can deliver on what it is that that company or organization needs very quickly.
And I mean, it takes both sides, right? Not just the fractional
Mhm.
executive, but also the company. And so, if our
Yes.
listeners today, you need to understand that it does take both sides to say, yes, this is we're in it to win it together. And so,
Mhm.
having a plan before you dive into these projects and, the project of building HR within the company culture is huge. How do, um, fractional executives, whether it's in HR or not, or another field, how do they build credibility in that company within the first, let's say, 30 to 60 days?
Well, I think that the way to build is you have to deliver value, right? So if you are there and you ask good questions, you learn about the company, you shouldn't be there to tell people how it is they're supposed to do things and what your ideas are before you actually have sat back and listened to the team members, right? That's the mistake I think a lot of new managers make is they come in and say, I'm here to save you, right? And that's not the way to do it because the way that company wants to do the things, the way they want results, could be very different. So I think you should pay attention to the way the fractional operates in your organization because you will quickly build trust with them because you'll understand they are there to support you. They are there to help you meet your objectives. They're not there for a personal mission to meet objectives that they have. They're there to meet your objectives. And their experience that they're bringing to the table, you're quickly going to see that they understand your issues very quickly. They understand your culture very quickly, and that you can rely on them and trust them very quickly. It doesn't take a long time before you realize if you've got the right partner or not.
Yeah, and keep in mind, folks, that more than 70% of fractional professionals bring at least 15 years of leadership experience to their
Right,
engagements. So it's
right,
not just about, oh, I have 15 years of experience, it's 15 years of leadership experience, right? And that's
right.
huge for any kind of fractional role because you are going to be teaching whoever you're leaving behind when you eventually walk away to be a leader and be a leader of choice based on my experience. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
No, for sure. I mean, I have, over 20 years of HR experience, and I say to my team, the teams that I have, I'll say, you don't want the same year of experience 15 times, right? Or 20 times. You want every year to be more challenging, learn more, learn in different functional areas. I always try to get my HR teams to cross train because eventually that allows you to bring more value to an organization. So you want someone who has had experience influencing leaders, building trust in organizations, who've been able to help mold company cultures. So you don't just need someone who knows the technical side of HR. Yes, that's important. You need to know the technical side of HR. I tried to learn that by taking all different types of positions, but then I also was able at a VP level, executive level, to influence leaders, influence outcomes, prove that HR is providing a return on investment. So you need all of those things in a successful fractional relationship. Otherwise, you just hire an HR consultant.
Right, right.
Right.
And let's talk about the
Mhm.
difference. We kind of
Mhm.
referred to it a little bit. There's a
Mhm.
difference between a consultant and a fractional
Mhm.
HR executive. Now, one person can be both, but
Absolutely.
a consultant usually works on like project based,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Where the executive is like, I'm in it to win it with you, even though I'm only here for a short time, full time,
Yes.
temporarily, or long term, but
Mhm.
on a few days a week. So there is definitely a difference between fractional executives and consultants. And I want to remind our listeners to make sure if if you're looking for a consultant, make sure you ask the right questions. And AI can help you with that, right?
Yes, they sure can. That's
Even
for
though
sure.
AI shouldn't be taking over your human resources.
That's right. Yeah, it can make mistakes. Definitely. And
Yeah.
it can make a lot of mistakes. So yeah, so what I was going to say is if you're a fractional executive, I mean, you should be sitting in on the leadership meetings. You're not necessarily going to have an HR consultant that's doing projects sitting in on leadership meetings, but a fractional should be participating in those strategic business decisions so that they understand how the business operates. I mean, they have to be operating at a strategic level. And if you leave them out of those very important conversations, you're not going to get as much value as you could out of them. So
Yeah.
that's a difference also between the two. And again, you could be a consultant and a fractional at the same time,
Yes.
right? But there is that distinction.
Cynthia, you've helped organizations save on benefits while also improving HR strategy. Where do you typically find the biggest opportunities for business impact that leaders often overlook, those internal leaders?
Okay. Well, benefits is a huge area of opportunity, and I'll speak to that in just a second. But first, I want to talk about how many leaders underestimate how connected HR decisions are from the rest of the organization. So, the biggest business impact usually comes from looking at the entire people strategy rather than each issue in isolation. So, the first area I like to see is HR truly aligned and supporting the goals of the business?
Right.
So, there shouldn't just be doing administrative tasks. So a lot of AI's capability can then help HR with their administrative tasks.
Right.
So always with oversight, of
Yeah, I was
course.
just going to say, ding, ding, ding,
Yeah,
little star here. Please be
that's right.
careful using
Don't
AI
just
and
let them
HR.
run.
Come back to one of our trainings on AI.
Exactly, exactly. So the next area is just process efficiency. So anytime I've gone into a company, I have found there's duplication of work everywhere, especially in the HR area. The technology is often underutilized. So there's so much more capability in the HR system than is being utilized. And what I find is there's a lack of training. HR systems companies used to provide really comprehensive training on how to use the tool. Now they just kind of say, here it is, right? Here's your new system and go forth and do HR, right? So you really need to look at what am I paying for as an organization? And this is the system and what am I actually using it for? And I have found companies that have many modules that have been paid for years that haven't been even used yet. So the efficiency can be improved. So you're paying for it, you might as well utilize it. And another area is just role clarity across the organization. So a lot of times organizations have changed, they've grown, and it's not that you need more people, it's you need more people doing the right things.
Right.
So if you go through and really help people understand their jobs, what they should be doing, look at your job descriptions. Some companies don't look at those for 10 years, right? Make sure that people are actually doing what they should be doing. And you can improve workflows and process without hiring more people. So there's always a savings to be had by doing that. But then you asked originally about benefits. Another thing that I've often found when I go into organizations is there's no one internally who is truly a benefits expert. They are relying on the benefits broker. And I'm not saying all brokers would do this, but many brokers, they kind of rest on their laurels, right? They put it out to bid 10 years ago. They get a renewal and they just renew. They aren't reviewing the plan with the group. They aren't having quarterly meetings with the group. They're not understanding how employees' needs might have changed. And sometimes I found companies are actually paying for the same benefit in more than one benefit package. So if they're buying them
Oh,
from different
yes.
companies, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you're
And the thing is, benefits account for about 30% of total employer compensation costs, and that's
yes,
huge. So
that's
if you have the
huge.
same benefit in two different programs and you didn't even
Mhm.
know about it, like cut one out and you're going to save some of that compensation money that you could be using on something else.
Absolutely. And I'm telling you, I found that many times that a lot of times because there's no one who's truly a benefit expert, who really doesn't, many people don't want to deal with benefits because they feel it's such a complicated area.
It
It
is.
just kind of it's left up to the broker, which, they're servicing multiple accounts, and honestly, they're getting commission off what you pay, right?
Yeah.
So the more you're paying, the more commission they're getting. So it's really good to have somebody who understands benefits come in and take a look at all of that, align them. Sometimes you can get more savings by consolidating benefits with the same company. And nobody's ever thought about doing that. So there's a lot of different ways that you can go in and look at the benefit structure, and I like to survey employees to find out what's valuable to them. So if you're paying for a benefit that, a fraction of employees are using, like, why are you paying for that? Right?
Right.
So there's a lot of different opportunities and benefits. I happen to love benefits. That's one of my things that I enjoy the most. So I always ask the CFO, can I manage this? And he's or she's usually like, yes, for sure, do it.
Yes, yes, I will gladly get that off of my plate. When
Exactly.
I was back in corporate HR, way, way, way back when, and I was newer as well. And I was also concerned, like, hey, I don't know if these brokers are taking advantage of me. So I went and got my license, my insurance license, just to
Very
get the
smart.
education. Like, I didn't plan on selling it. I didn't like it that
Hmm.
much. But I
Hmm.
was like, no, I want you agents and brokers to know that I'm educated and I'm licensed on this. So the buck stops here. But going back to what you're saying, there are so many opportunities to consolidate your benefits, and then suddenly your
Hmm.
30% of the total employer compensation cost might go down to 28 or 27%. And that's a
Exactly.
lot of money.
It's a
Those
lot
little
of
tiny
money.
percentages add up, and then you can use that money for something else. Like, oh, let's
Absolutely.
increase our vacation, or I don't know, our company bonuses, whatever it might be. Get
Hmm.
everybody a new phone, whatever it
Right.
might be. It's still benefits, but it's so hard to attract and retain employees these days, that
Mhm.
every little percentage of savings that we can turn around and help the company and then hopefully help the employee really, really does matter. So I
It
I, lo-
does.
I love that you're a benefits junkie and that you love it,
Yes.
because most
It's
people do not. So that's
no.
another thing, making sure that folks, if you are hiring a fractional HR executive, make sure you are asking them what their specialties are. In this case, we're talking about benefits. I know Cynthia personally, and I know that you have a lot more experience than just benefits, but
Oh
there could
yeah.
be fractional that is only focusing on recruiting, fractional that's only
Hmm.
focusing on leadership development and management training, or it could be a one person fits all. But you can have several fractional in there that are very expertise driven, that can help you, turn around turnover and improve employee experience.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, you always want to understand, first of all, what it is you need a fractional for. And secondly, does the experience of the fractional line up with what it is you need? So you definitely should be asking the questions about when have they experienced, what is their experience and what have they done? Yeah, I like benefits for fun. The rest of it, I've done everything in HR, but like to me, the fun part is mostly benefits is fun. So.
I
Nobody
love it.
usually says that, so
I was going to say that. Nobody
I
ever really says, like, I
know.
love that, but I
I
can't
know
say
that's
nobody,
so
because
weird.
everybody has their specialty. And
Exactly,
so,
exactly.
my next question for you is that, since HR is increasingly and finally become a strategic business function,
Mm-hmm.
organizations considering a fractional executive, especially for HR for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
what should they look for during that, like, interview process, during that hiring process, and what are the biggest mistakes they should avoid? So number one, what should they look for if they're hiring a fractional HR executive?
Well, the first thing I would say is they should. I would not say I'm going to hire somebody based on the number of hours that they're available. Like, don't think of it in terms of hours. All
Mm-hmm.
right, think of it in terms of business outcomes you need to achieve. Because if you're hiring a fractional and you know the business outcomes you need, they will tell you this is what I'm going to charge you for that business outcome, and they'll figure out how to make it happen, right?
Right.
So I would stop thinking in terms of hourly rates, how many hours they worked, as we talked before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would say during the hiring process, the first thing that they have to do as a company is identify what is truly the need. So if you're just think my HR department is broken, right? It's just not working, or I just don't have, I need help, whatever. So if you bring in a fractional, they're going to get pulled into every operational issue that exists. So first of all, define what it is you need. Ideally, have 3 business outcomes, for example, to start. And then you can ask that fractional that you're interviewing, tell me about a time that you dealt with this issue. So ideally, you want a fractional who's experienced the issue that you're going through and what you need to solve, because they'll be able to help you quickly and effectively. That's the first thing. Also, just make sure that you talk about leadership style, like what is our communication style? How do we want to communicate with you? I mean, you want to feel comfortable that you can build a relationship with that fractional very quickly, because that is what trust comes from. Right? So if you have an awkward conversation, or for whatever reason, your communication during the interview process just doesn't feel comfortable, then that's not a good fit, because you need to be hand in glove with this person. You need to be working with them very closely. So you want to know they have the experience, and you want to know that there's somebody that you can work with.
Yeah, I love it. So when you're setting up, the contract, so that's a whole other conversation of making sure you're having some legal contract going on, just like you would with hiring a worker, but setting those expectations, providing a clear scope, and for accountability reasons, setting up the metrics and how you're going to measure them, so that the fractional consultant or the fractional executive is like, okay, now I feel comfortable, or I don't. And then also making sure, are we doing good, or are we totally missing the mark? It's super, super important. Well,
Yes.
what are the biggest mistakes they should avoid?
Well, I think the biggest mistake is hiring somebody because they're the least expensive, right?
Oh, yes, that's a very,
Yes,
very good point.
that's a big one, because you're paying for business outcomes, and you want somebody who's been there, done that, and can deliver for you, right? So you want somebody who has the most expertise, who's not the cheapest, right? Necessarily, right? That's the last thing that you have to consider your budget, but if you're just taking, like, having people make proposals and you pick the lowest one, you're going to get what you pay for. That's in all things in life, right?
Right.
So I would say that's the first one. The second one is you go into, as I mentioned before, if you go into the relationship and you don't have clear priorities. So if you're not telling that fractional executive, this is what I need you to do, this is the time period I would like it to be completed in, then again, you bring them in and they can't focus and get to work immediately. They're going to be pulled into every issue that comes up that's related to HR, because people are going to hear, oh, they're an HR fractional executive, they can solve my problem with this employee over here, right? Like, I have a dispute with an employee here, she's HR, let me go talk to her. Well, that's not really what this fractional executive is there for. They're there to solve your problems, right? They're to help you with strategy or systems or whatever it is, not to deal with it day to day. That's an HR manager who would help you on site, right? To deal with interpersonal issues.
Yeah, 100%. And keep in mind, folks, that nearly, like, on the C-suite level, nearly 44% of CEOs hired usually come from outside the organization. And so it's the same thing for a fractional HR executive. Maybe you can convince them to, fill the HR role, but first you need to actually set up the HR department. And as Cynthia mentioned, not be handing them all of the HR responsibilities, because that is not what a fractional HR executive is going to be there for, or they're just not going to achieve those measurements that you set out for them. Well, before we
Yes.
wrap up, are there any resources that you'd recommend for listeners interested in, diving into this topic a little bit further? Don't you have a book?
Well, I have a book that's coming out soon. It's called The Workplace Jungle, and a guide for new managers. And what I have done is I've taken the most interesting experiences that I have encountered throughout my HR career. I've made short chapters with a lesson or lessons attached. And what I tried to do is make it very humorous, but based on reality. So I've read so many HR leadership texts and behavioral based books that I found so dull and dry. And I didn't really learn much from it, except for I could quote you leadership theory. So I tried to write a book that was really educational for new managers, especially, but also entertaining, so that it wasn't so dry. So that will be coming out shortly.
So
You'll
excited. That's
Yes, thank you.
congratulations, first of all. And I'm
Thank
so
you.
excited to read it. Well, before we walk away, how can people
Mhm.
connect with you?
Well, you can always find me on LinkedIn, Cynthia Keaton on LinkedIn, and also my email is cynthiakeatonhr@gmail. So if somebody has any questions like about my background or what I could deliver for as a fractional, et cetera, I'm happy to answer those questions.
Absolutely. Well, I will make sure her contact information is in the podcast notes. I hope this podcast session has been beneficial and helpful to you, listeners. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Have a great day.
Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.